All right, so this is a pretty interesting question. Your parents are heading out on vacation. They leave the house. They're traveling at a constant speed of 90 kilometers an hour. 30 minutes later, you realize that one of their bags is sitting, and you definitely don't want them to come back home. So you, the thrill seeker that you are, head out traveling 110 kilometers an hour, hoping to catch up with them. And the question is, if you're going fast, well, I mean, the thing is, if you're going faster than they are, you will eventually catch up with them. But where does that happen? So this is the point where you catch up, right? This is where you catch up. So think of it like they left the house, and then how many minutes later? 30 minutes later. So in this interval here, 30 minutes has gone by. So half an hour. Half an hour has gone by. If they're traveling, your parents are traveling at a speed of 90 kilometers per hour, right? And you're traveling at a speed of 110 kilometers per hour. This is sort of a snapshot of where they are when you leave your house, and then again where you catch up to them. And so the thing you don't know is how far ahead are they when they catch up. This is another one of those things where you don't have all the information. And if you don't know where this, so this is the thing you don't know, right? This distance here. We're just going to call it X. Just give it a variable and it'll solve itself out. This is a case where you're working on a word problem and you're going to end up setting up simultaneous equations. So we're going to construct the equations based on the variables and the information we know. So once again, we're going to rely on this formula, V equals delta X over delta T, right? This is true for you and it's true for your parents. So we're going to set it up. Let's just look at you first. We'll set up your variables, delta X, delta T, and V. All right, so what do we know here? And what I'm talking about is from the second. So now we have to kind of decide what we're dealing with. If we start your problem at the instant you leave the house, then your parents have already traveled at 90 kilometers an hour for half an hour, right? Either way, so if you think about your parents, they're going 90 kilometers an hour for half an hour. The distance they're going to travel by the time you start is going to be 45 kilometers, right? And we get that by saying delta X equals V delta T. V is 90, T is 0.5, half an hour. So then that's 45 kilometers, right? So what you can say for you, the distance you have to travel is going to be 45 plus the distance extra until you catch up to them. The time it takes you is going to be, I don't know what it is, but let's call it T. So there's two variables in this problem. We don't know how long you're traveling for, and we don't know how far you have to go. Seems insurmountable, but if we put them in as variables, we can figure this out. We do know that your speed is 110 kilometers per hour. Now let's look at your parents. Okay, so again, same variables, delta X, delta T, and V. Now, how far do your parents travel? So we've already taken into account this 45 kilometers. It's almost like we're starting the clock once you leave the house, not once your parents left the house. So in this case, your parents only have to drive an additional distance of X because they're already at this location. They're already 45 kilometers ahead. And how long is that going to take them? Well, we don't know, but once you start the clock, I mean, assuming you catch up to them, that kind of implies you're at the same delta X at the same time, right? So I'm going to say it takes them, they're also going at a time T, and they're traveling at a speed of 90 kilometers per hour. So this is how we're going to do this. We're just going to create equations here. So the equation we create for you is 45. So I'm going to use, let me just go back a little. We're going to use this equation, delta X equals V delta T. I mean, you could use any version of this, but this is just sort of simple. So this is 45 plus X equals 110 times T. So that's an equation. I'm just going to put a circle around it and call that equation 1. And then we're going to go over to your parents and do the same thing. But in this case, it's x equals 90. So again, sorry, delta x equals v delta t. And in this case, we don't know x is delta x is just, we're just calling it x equals 90 delta t, or we just called it t. So 90t. So that's my second equation. So this is equation 2. So you can see that for these two equations, we have the same unknowns. So what we're going to do is solve simultaneously. Solve. How do I spell solve? I can't spell. So we're going to solve simultaneously. All right, so how do I do that? Well, I can substitute 2 into 1. So substitute 2 into 1. And in doing so, I get 45 plus, and now it's going to be 90t, because this is equation 2 right here. Sorry, equals 110t. So now we can just solve this. So 45 equals 110 minus 90 equals 20t. So t equals 45 divided by 20, which is 2.25. So 2.25 hours. So let's just stop and make sure we really understand what we have here. What did we say time was? It was the time that you spent traveling, right? So this is the time. This is the time you were driving. I mean, if you think about it, your parents were driving for a half an hour longer than this. So it was 2.75 hours for them. Then you can take this time and substitute it into this, back into equation 2, for example. And then you can see that, let's see. So x equals 90 times 2.25. So that equals 202.5. So x equals 202.5. And what am I solving? This is in kilometers. What am I solving here? What am I saying here? Well, in this case, this is actually, since we talked about x here, this is only the distance your parents traveled, isn't it? And that's not what the question, this is only the distance parents traveled. And you traveled an additional 45 kilometers. So if that's since the question is actually asking when and where will you catch your parents, you can basically just add. So when you catch them is going to be 2.25 hours after you leave the house. And in order to find where, you're going to have to add, so for your distance, let me just do this over here. For your distance, you're going to have to say 45 plus x, right? Because that's basically what we found here is equal to 202 plus 45 equals 247, 247.5 kilometers. So the where, you can say it's 247.5 kilometers away from home. This is just one way to solve the problem. You could have solved it a number of different ways. And you could have also defined it in different ways. I mean, the problem is kind of vague. You could have said 2.75. Sorry, you could have said, let's see, the time. Yeah, you could have said your parents were traveling for half an hour longer. So you could have said 2.75 hours after your parents left. There's different ways you could have approached it, but setting up the two equations, kind of the key to this problem is knowing to leave these variables as variables because we don't know what they are. And so if you leave them as variables, you can solve the equation simultaneously and get the answer.